for all 3 action-packed nights, plus loads of fantastic consolation prizes including free instant scratch tickets, lottery merchandise, and $40 flow phone credits. Enter with $10 in non-winning Pick 3 tickets, along with your name, address, and telephone number, and drop in the boxes at participating Caribbean lottery agents. Promotion runs until June 22nd, 2018. Well, hi there, and good afternoon, and welcome to Issues for Today. I'm Junie Librad, your host, and I'll be here until just about 3 o'clock this afternoon. And today we'll be talking about the Caribbean economy. My distinguished guest is Peter Adrian. He's a developer.
I think what it allows me to do is to be part of the education, part of the discussion. And I will attempt in my own way, Junie, to what I call demystify economics.
Yes.
This is not a mystery.
Right.
Some people would like us to think it like that. So if we think it like that, it becomes a little preserve of the few, of the elites. And the same thing, so when you think of accounting and economics, you think it's only a few that has the expertise, the endowment to speak about it. I would like to, in a sense, to discuss the developments in the Caribbean, and by the Caribbean I mean the English-speaking Caribbean. I will zero on the CARICOM countries, and I will showcase in particular the OECS, and I will highlight in significant way St. Kitts and Nevis.
Great.
I want to put it in perspective. The IMF published their latest projection on May 12th.
Right.
And they have, in a sense, projected or forecasted a rather favorable forecast. That is, things are improving. And that is good news because there have been a lot of lows in the Caribbean since 2008 and 2009. In fact, some economies like Barbados and Trinidad are in what we would call ICU. In fact, because of the downswing in oil and lubricant prices over the 5 years or so, Trinidad economy has really received a battering. And as a result, it has gone into successive recession. Now, we see our country goes into recession when the country gets, if you want, negative growth, which I will explain, for 2 successive quarters. Now, it has been so for Trinidad even greater. The case of Barbados, likewise. Jamaica is being propped up, and it is with the IMF, and it's coming on good because it gets support from the World Bank. Once you are with the IMF program, it gives you the litmus test or the certificate if you want. And then this allows you, therefore, to flex yourself, because when you get access to soft capital or grant fund from the World Bank, you get the capacity to be able to leverage, if you are highly indebted, leverage your indebtedness with your creditors and say, look, I have my IMF certificate. And it says, look, I am on a good program to turn around my economy. So those guys can begin to speak with you, like the Paris Club, etc., etc. So therefore, that you can get haircuts, etc., etc. What I want to do is to speak a little about the methodology that we use as economists to set the basis as to why GDP growth rate, why emphasis on employment, why inflation, why indebtedness, why investment is so important. What is the impact of government policy on this thing? When a policy is a good policy and when it is a bad policy. When we speak about the economy, we are really talking about 3 sets of activities. One, we talk of the macroeconomy. That is, we take into account all that is produced in a country, everything that is distributed and everything that is consumed. That is everything that has a value. Now, we also take in consideration what we refer to as the microeconomy. By the microeconomy, we talk about all the activities of individuals, of household, and businesses. Then we speak of the fiscal economy. By the fiscal economy, we're really talking about the activities of the government sector. That is central government and quasi-government. Quasi-government, those institutions that are related to government, say like Social Security. They are not central, but they are quasi. What they produce, what they distribute, what they consume, and in particular, we are interested in how revenue is raised. So the inflows of revenue, and we are interested in expenditure, how governments spend what they spend. We are interested in the policy, and I'll tell you why later on, because the policy has serious implication as to how the economy will perform. A policy may energize, it may stimulate, another policy may dampen. So therefore, when we speak of the economy, we are actually referring to that totality of the domestic system of production, of distribution, and consumption. That's simple put, that's what the economy is. Now, how do we do our economic analysis? Economic analysis, I must say upfront, are only indicative. Let me repeat that. Economic analysis are only indicative. That is, they are not fact at a point of time. They are estimates. That is why we call them indicators. Why do I emphasize that they are indicators? You see, Juni, in the Caribbean, because our economies are small, they are rather underdeveloped, they are opened, the external sector is very open, and our periodic macroeconomic accounting that we do, the accounting, because we do macroeconomic accounting, that is get the numbers together, make sure that we put them together and whatever. Now, this is usually incomplete. All the macroeconomic analysis that we do and the accounting, whether on a monthly basis, or quarterly basis, annual basis, because of our underdeveloped nature, they are usually incomplete. Why? What makes them incomplete? Because the transmission effect of any activity or any project, whether it's an investment project, it takes time to be accounted for. Let me give an example. You may have a massive investment in St. Kitts in April. But as to the detail as to how the investment project impacts the banking system, how it impacts the private savings, how it impacts the household, how it impacts government revenue, how it impacts the balance of payment, that is what we sell and what we buy, and so on, it is not known completely. And sometimes it takes 3 to 6 months after for you to really begin to account for how that project impacts the country. Now, that is why we use estimates. When the actual data comes in, maybe after 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, or the next quarter, we revise the estimate. That is very, very important. I'm saying that because I'm coming to a point. Therefore, we must be very careful when we hear people banding numbers around left, right, and center. Why? Because in most cases, they are treating estimates as if they were actuals. And therefore, this is the wrong use of information. So the people say, for example, the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, the Caribbean Development Bank, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund. Those are those major institutions that analyze and that help us in economic management. They may make a very gloomy projection, any one of them, about, say, St. Kitts, St. Lucia, Grenada, at a particular time, maybe at the end of a quarter, or at the beginning of the year, or at the end of the year. And oftentimes, people may use this, if it is favorable to them, to make mileage. But the reality is, it is simply a forecast which may never come true, which may come true, or which may turn out to be worse than what is predicted. Very, very, very important. So, how this leads to, how do we feel, therefore, the temperature of the economy with all that I have said? Notwithstanding all the limitations that I have discussed or highlighted, we use movements or changes in the gross domestic product. That is all what that the country produces or spend on. There are different, two, the most popular method of calculating that is the expenditure method. To take its temperature, to determine how the government policies are either spurring or hurting the economy. So that GDP is very, very important. That is why we began talking about, the IMF talks about GDP. So GDP, in a sense, is your temperature gauge. It's a temperature gauge, but remember, it's an estimate. Remember, it is indicative. Remember, it must be revised. So be careful with that. Now, what do I mean by the term GDP? Sometimes we make these things sound, Junior, as if it is some mystery out there, a big box that you open and then you get GDP. Not exactly. Everything that we produce. As I said, the household produce, the firms produce, the government produce, or everything that we spend on that have a value. At a particular time that you are doing the accounting, if it is every quarter or if it is every month, you use your template, your methodological template, to try to capture all these things that are happening. And of course, you can understand by saying that, even if a small economy like St. Kitts, don't even talk about the big economy, you can imagine that a lot of that will be incomplete. You can imagine, therefore, that your error, what we call your error is the number that we use for all the other things we could not account for. In some cases can be large. So to calculate the GDP of a country, if we are using the expenditure method, we calculate the money spent by different groups that participate in the economy. For example, as I said before, consumers spend to buy various goods and services. The businesses spend money to invest in their business activity. They buy machinery. Government spend monies on goods and services. GDP, therefore, is the value, as I sum up, the value of all that is produced locally or consumed, or all that is all the expenditures that we make. It is, in a sense, the value of the country's output. So if you can think of an output, a man go out to bat and he score 8, the country the same way, if you put everything that they do, whether it is in goods and service, all the value, at this particular time, it is the country's output.
Stick a pin there temporarily on your analysis. I know you're proceeding according to the plan of defining the economy and looking at the economic analysis and looking at the GDP temperature of the economy. And I want to ask you, though, I was reading something here which I copied from the CDB. It says, the extreme vulnerability of the Caribbean region was highlighted once again in 2017. This is a 2017 forecast. Many Caribbean Development Bank borrowing member countries were affected by hurricanes that passed through the Caribbean in September. Notwithstanding the devastating events in 2017, there was an overall uptick in economic growth to 0.6%. Although growth returned in 2017, the region continues to underperform in comparison with other country groups. Looking ahead, the region is expected to grow by 2% in 2018, benefiting from a projected increase in global economic growth, but risks are tilted on the downside. Now, and they put out a chart here, Professor, don't mind if I call you. they put out a chart here where they're looking at a country ranking the countries as it pertains to their GDP growth, and the Dominican Republic is first at 6.6. These are 2016 estimates. And Panama second, Nicaragua is third, Costa Rica is fourth, Guyana is fifth with 4.00. And let me go down. St. Martin is eighth with 3.60, and that was from a 2014 estimate. Montserrat is 10th with 3.50, 2016 estimate. And St. Kitts and Nevis is also placed at 10th with a 3.50 estimate. My question to you, Professor, is, okay, when the former administration was in power, we were getting some GDP growth rates of 7% and 6 point so on, but it now stands at 3.50. What are some of the factors that may have contributed to the to this number, to this drop in GDP in St. Kitts and Nevis?
All right. Very good. Let me answer Jimmy, Juni, in the context of putting it, I'm just summarizing the IMF forecast, the group forecast.
Right.
Now, on the 12th of May, the International Monetary Fund made the following projection. Mm-hmm. Now, you know, they tend to group the Caribbean with Latin America.
Latin America, yes.
Now, that's not always good, because the countries, we have to be very careful how we compare countries. One, you have variability in size. You have variability in, if you want, in the stage of development. Mm-hmm. So, for example, I'm just saying that en passant. It's not prudent for me to say, compare St. Lucia with America, mm-hmm. or compare St. Lucia with Australia, because Australia is an established economy, meaning that its infrastructure, or its basic infrastructure, is already in place.
So they're ranking
physical infrastructure.
Underdeveloped countries together?
No, the ranking that you gave.
The ranking, yes.
You had Dominican Republic with this and that and that and that.
Right.
I am not going to do that. I'm going to pull them, and I'm going to put them in at least some countries or economies that are more similar. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to compare St. Kitts with DR. That's not fair. Mm-hmm. Because one, we're talking about different economic size, mm-hmm. and secondly, different economic endowment. Mm-hmm. I mean, let's just take, if you take DR, for example, let's just take the containerized sector in DR. DR could clear about 100, 200 containers, bam, in less than a minute, mm-hmm. because of the sophistication of its warehousing and its clearance.
The technology and all
so
of
in
that.
other words,
mm-hmm.
we don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. But what you want to do, in a sense, is to look at, as much as possible, economies that are more of similar history, similar geography, similar endowment. Mm-hmm. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to pull CARICOM countries, English, and I'm going to separate those that are more endowed. For example, I'm going to separate Trinidad. Trinidad have been more oil-based, lubricant and whatever. Jamaica is a little bigger and whatever. So I'm going to group as much as possible. I'm going to talk about the OECS. Mm-hmm. And it's in that context I'm going to look at St. Kitts and Nevis.
All right.
So they said that according to the IMF figures, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, they all registered growth. They are supposed to register growth of 2% in 2018. Remember, 18 is not finished yet. That's a projection. Mm-hmm. It's a projection. But they say they will remain stagnant. These two countries will remain stagnant for 2019 and 20. In other words, now, when we talk about the growth rate, allow me to say that. Growth rate. What do we mean by growth rate? Growth rate means we take all that the country, as I said, produce, the GDP, let us say at a particular year. So we say December 2016. Now, we do the same for December 2019. So what we are already comparing, we are comparing the rate of change. That's very, very important. The rate of change between the period 2016 and the period 2017. Now, the rate of change in a country may be very much larger than another country, but that does not mean that country is wealthier or more endowed than another country. For example, I will show you here. St. Kitts has a greater growth rate than United States of America. It's not more wealthier than the United States of America. It's not more endowed. So we are talking about the change in a particular period. That's what we are talking about. It says that Barbados and Trinidad are the only two countries that are projected to register negative growth. And we know that Barbados and Trinidad have been going through the economic difficulties. Barbados because of the slump in the tourism industry, which has remained flat since in the 90s. And of course, we know that the sugar industry had been in deficit since in the 80s. And Trinidad and Tobago, which of course is suffering, if you want, the persistent drop in oil prices over the years and that of lubricant. Okay, it says Grenada is expected to register the highest growth for the next 2 years, that's 3.6%. Antigua will register 3.5% growth in 2018 and 3% in 2019. St. Kitts will register economic growth of 3.5% in 2018 and 3.2% in 2019. Now, when I looked at the figures for St. Kitts, it shows that St. Kitts and Nevis is actually performing better than the rest of CARICOM. Barbados, Jamaica, Trinidad, for that example. I look at what is it that are driving that growth. And to do that, what I did, I went into the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank database. And I observed that construction, real estate, transportation, and public administration, those were very big contributors. I observed that with construction, it is mainly driven primarily by the housing stock, not real estate as it was in the time of, say, 2013, 2014, 2015. A lot of those driving activity in that sector was, if you want, you build shell. That's what construction is. You build a shell. Real estate is you sell that shell. Now, if you look at the construction, you notice that if you look at development in the housing scape, you observe that a lot of activity is taking place there. So the activity is not so much in building shell for sale, that is building condo and villa and this and that, as it were under the Citizenship by Investment program. But for example, if you drive around, say you go to St. Peter's and the environment there, you see a beautiful changes taking place there. And a lot of that is private housing stock, development in the housing stock. Now, real estate, in fact, the construction shows that in 2015, it contributed 18.9%. In 2016, construction contributed 19.8% that of GDP. In 2017, it contributed 21.6%, and is projected to contribute 22.1%. So so there is something good happening there in the housing stock. In the real estate, unfortunately, is classified in the balance of payment. Is classified in the GDP with rental and business activity, Junior. I don't think this is very good, because in a sense, the figures I'm going to quote there, they are not necessarily indicative of what happens in real estate. Because real estate, rental and business activities are classified as one category in the GDP accounting. But that moved from 15.2% in 2015. It remained flat in 2016, 15.2, and we noticed that by 2017, that began to, it dropped by 8.8 percentage point, and it's forecasted that it is going to continue to drop to 14% in 2018. So, although this category does not capture, we cannot speak authoritatively on that sufficiently, because we have rental and business added to that. But there certainly it is showing that there is indicative of a decline in the real estate sector. All right, and when I drive around, I seem to see some confirmation of that. You see a number of projects that were alive under the buoyancy of the Citizenship by Investment program. Some of those projects are non-functional, and some of them have become still. Transportation, storage, and communication, they are lumped together, and these have remained flat, contributing 12% to GDP.
Right.
Public administration, government service, the fiscal economy, they contribute a lot to GDP. Now, something that we have to bear in mind, Juni, you know the economy can actually grow, and you don't feel the effect of the unemployment, you know.
Let me ask
because
you this,
it depends. For example,
yes,
if a lot of these activities are coming from the public administration, for example, particularly if activities in the public sector investment program, what we call the PSIP, if a lot of that is being done by, say, foreign contractors, it means that the transmission or the multiplier effect is not going through. So you can have high growth rate and very little feeling of what is happening.
Let me ask you something, Peter. Now, you mentioned that the economic indicators of growth in a country pertain to GDP, employment, wages, etc.
Yes.
But the problem with Sinkis and Nevis, according to one of the writers on the Freedom Wall, is the economy. The problem with Sinkis and Nevis is the economy is still too one-sided, he says, or she says. Most of the new jobs are in construction, and not everyone wants to do construction. So yes, there is economic growth, but not everyone is a part of it. Do you agree with that?
I think that is what the figures are. I think the figures are showing that.
Right.
Because if you look at for example, let's look back at the driver. According to the contribution here, construction still remains the major driver.
Right.
And when you say major driver, we have to be careful. When I say driver, be careful, it's not necessarily driving it. It's a greater contributor. Contributor. Now, but if you notice what is happening there, the driving activity in the subsector that was driving the activity between 2012, 13, 14, 11, 12, 13, 14 was more building shell. The housescape was happening, that is, people were building private houses, but at the same time, there was a vibrant activity of building shell and selling it.
What's shell? What's building shell?
Real estate.
Okay.
Real estate
was this driven by the government? Because government...
By the Citizenship by Investment program.
Citizenship by Investment. Okay, great.
But
I'm glad you specified.
But as we'll come later on, I'll show you that something peculiar is happening in the Citizenship by Investment program. We'll come to that.
Okay.
When we talk about investment. So in a sense, with the movement in that, because what we have in Citizenship by Investment program, I can just touch it and come back.
Sure.
The receipt from Citizenship by Investment program, and for that I am losing, because I can't talk about the real estate receipt, because that goes to the private. I'm using what the IMF published, that is receipt of SIDF. Because that is where the money is coming. That's why you can account for that money. Because for the real estate, what would be coming to the government, their fees, their due diligence and whatever, the private goes into different people. But the contribution that the people make people who decide to put into the foundation to get a citizenship certificate, that is, it is empirical, it is analyzed, and I can quote it from the IMF. What we see is its contribution to GDP has sharply declined. Now, what we do in economics, we try to determine the usefulness of a sector in relation to how it contributes to GDP, its share of GDP. So that, like I said with construction is important because it is contributing 18% to GDP. With the citizenship by investment, and by that I mean the receipt that comes into SIDF, it was 14% of GDP. That's very high. In 2013. And currently, it is 2.7%.
That's a significant drop. That's a significant drop.
It's not just significant. It means the product is finishing.
Okay.
Because it's projected that for 2018, it will go down to 1.7. So basically, I'll come back to that.
Is that because of competition in the region, why the decline has taken place, or there are other factors?
There are other factors, but I think better we deal with it right now.
Yeah, let's deal with it. Let's deal with it because that's important to our people.
It's very important, June. It's important, and it's important that we discuss it in the context. We discuss it in the context of openness.
Yes.
Okay. So we'll come back to what you were saying, but let's take an excursion into this one.
Sure.
Now, what is really happening is, let me just quote the figures. Let me quote the figures here. I'm quoting IMF. SIDF receipt to GDP. Remember that we use that as indicator of usefulness or importance. 2013, it was 14.0 of GDP. 2000, and you can go in the IMF report, I'm quoting the report. 2014, it was 14.2% of GDP. 2015, 12.4% of GDP. 2016, it begins to go down very sharply, 7.2% of GDP. 2017, 3.9% of GDP. Is projected for 3.7% in 2018 and 1.8% of 2019. So basically what has happened is, I think a number of factors contribute to that. One, when I went into the IMF, to the central bank balance of payment data. And what I look for the flow of new money. Now that's important, because that's what the citizenship by investment was doing. Because if you really want to spur an economy, you bring in new money. You don't bring in new money, basically what you have is circulation of what you have. And you're going to die. Ask Barbados about it. So as you bring in new money, now it shows that in 2014, that is foreign investment flow, was 441 million. And by 2016, that is for St. Kitts, foreign investment flow, that's new monies, had gone down to 228 million. So basically what we see here is a drop of 48.3% in the inflow of new money. Yes, a drop of 48.3% in the inflow of new money into St. Kitts from 2014 to 2016. So
in a very real sense, all the socioeconomic programs that were engendered by the citizenship by investment monies that were coming into the country, because of this decline, some of those programs would have to be phased out. Some of those programs for building, for doing low-income housing and so on, would if they're not coming to a halt, would be significantly hampered.
I think the issue is bigger than that, Julius. It is bigger than that. But that is important what you're saying there, because those social programs were, in a sense...
I have to look out for my people, you know.
Those social... Look, something is sticking me here, Jenny. I think you're trying to
take your time. You're
trying to throw me down in the studio. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to hurt me?
No, you're getting caught up in the wires, you know.
Okay. The social programs, they were ancillary to the major activities that unleash from. But it's the major activities you have to look at. For example,
hotel development.
More than that, because we're talking about the receipt from SIDF, the hotel development, villa development, other stuff like that. These were being spurred by the real estate. Remember, there are two segments, there are two products of the city by investment program. There's the real estate product, and there's the SIDF. The real estate product was actually being spurred by the private sector. Private developers, are you with me? So as you drive about, you see Embassy Suites, you see Call, you did this, and whatever. You know what I'm saying? Now, the figures, the movement we can account for, which I'm accounting for. Remember, I'm an economist, I'm a pro. I can only give you on what I have. It is those for which we have flows. Those that we have flow is the monies that came into the foundation. And that is the one that IMF has, and that is the one it produces. But
where is the money that's coming into the SIDF coming from?
The people who apply for citizenship.
Exactly.
So when we see the decline here, the decline is saying two things. It is saying, it is begging you to ask the question, what were the activities, the economic activities that were associated with those inflow?
Right.
I know them because I was there. I was there from 2012 to 2016.
Tell us.
I was there. I know that. I was there.
Yes.
And I was the economic advisor. So, every infrastructure benefited. Don't forget that. No more stoppages. Anytime there was an electrical stoppage, SIDF funded a new generator. I'm not asking you that. I'm telling you. The roads, the school, you name it. In fact, this administration was very fortunate. IMF tried their best to stop that. Because in a sense, what it actually had was a reserve fund which it did not have to depend significantly on the fiscal economy.
Right, exactly.
And the thing is, it was able to deal with this fiscal fund as if it was above the line. Now, in fiscal accounting, we speak of above the line and below the line. Above the line means that you deal with the thing as if it is recurrent expenditure.
Right.
It is below the line if you can only use it for capital expenditure. That's what IMF wants to do. When IMF is urging you to bring the funds into the consolidated fund,
right.
What they are actually,
but this hasn't been done.
But I come in. Let me.
You're coming to that. Okay.
So what they would do, Junie, because that was a discussion, is to urge you. And of course, they have a basis for it. The basis that they will tell you, create reserve. And that is good. The more reserve a country can have is better. They tell you create reserve, put it in the capital account, so that you can only use it if you have a capital project to undertake.
Right.
The previous administration had the liberty of being able to use it above the line because it was not in the consolidated fund. So any time there was an adjustment, any time there was a need, it therefore had a reserve or a reservoir to go to. Now these are the things. So with the decline of the product, these are the things. Of course, the first stage that is going to suffer.
Right.
And of course, the associate things that you said, the social and the this and the that. But, Judy, I want to say there are other factors that impact on the decline. Because if you look at the explanatory factors, one was the loss of the Canadian visa-free entry, and the loss of the third-party seeking applicants. This is a thing that I learned when I was down there. You could classify the applicants into three groups, but the major group or the driver group was those persons who were coming particularly, say, from China, from Russia, from the Middle East, but those persons had one singular interest. They were seeking for entry into a third country. So in other words, what they wanted was your citizenship certificate, which is translated into a green book. And the green book now give them access to that country which they could not go. I had the privilege of going to Vancouver in Canada. It's basically a Chinese territory. So when they lost that privilege, the demand shifted. It shifted from St. Kitts to Antigua, which had just entered the market. So that the demand was high for the Antiguan product by that class of applicants, because at that time Antigua still had the visa-free privileges into Canada. Now, watch it now. At that time, Antigua began to play a big boy. And you heard little quarrels and whatever. And because remember, when you're talking about citizenship by investment product, it's basically, before St. Lucia came in, was Dominica. Grenada was there already, but it had gone down since 9/11, and it came back. So it was Dominica, Grenada, Antigua, that had just come in, and St. Kitts, which is the bastion,
right?
Because it had been there from antiquity, not antiquity, from since 84,
right?
So, but in other words, had all the knowledge, all the insertion, and all, if you want, the experience. When that happened, the trek moved to Antigua. But in 2016, last year,
was it because their package was more advantageous
because that is correct also. But that category, that classification of applicants are the filthy rich. Very, very important.
The filthy rich.
I call them filthy rich because they have a lot of money.
A lot of money.
So, in other words,
yes,
that's a significant percentage of your applicants. You know what I'm saying? So, when Antigua lost that now, basically what the North Atlantic countries had succeeded in doing is to bring all of them to their knees. So whether it is St. Lucia, whether it is Dominica, whether it is Grenada, whether it is Antigua, whether it is St. Kitts, they all have no access, visa access to Canada. So right now, I think, and I was very happy when two or 3 weeks ago, I heard that they had a beautiful meeting at the Marriott. Because they cannot fight like crabs anymore. You either band together. In fact, the product is going to end anyhow. The product is going to thin down and become...
That's your forecast?
Well, that's
facts. The facts is borne out by the facts.
Well, that's the IMF forecast. That is it. The projection is from 13% of GDP in 2013, 14% of GDP in 2014, 12% of GDP in 2015. I'm quoting the IMF.
Right.
7% of GDP in 2016, 3.9%.
It's trending downwards.
It's not trending, it's collapsing.
It's collapsing.
Because in 2019, it's projected to be 1.
Right.
So in other words, technically, unless something drastic is done here in St. Kitts, the product is finished.
Wow.
That's not Peter that said that. Hey, is it the IMF? I'm simply interpreting it. That's what it is.
Right.
Not me.
Wow.
My job here is to educate. I don't have no sides, you know.
Yes.
Because the only thing I have sold in St. Kitts and people say that I have done well is my reputation.
Now, you notice that the Caribbean governments, in response to the collapse that is being forecasted by the IMF, are reducing the price of the passports now, where they used to be 250 million.
You're not talking, not the Caribbean countries. You mean those few countries that offer citizenship by investment product.
Right.
Remember, it's only a few of them.
A few, yes.
In the basic Eastern Caribbean.
Right, and now offering less for the economic citizenship passports.
But that is what the market does. This is the heartbeat of the market, demand and supply.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, when demand is high, what do? Price go up. Go buy the market. Go and buy food now.
Right.
The vendors say anything is $5.
Mm-hmm.
I have to buy the plantain, $5. A fellow told me $6 a pound. A pound I'm talking about. The same thing for that. It's a market. It's a market for citizenship. So when the demand goes down, right now, the demand for all of them going down. And I think some of them basically are priced out. St. Lucia is not going to get much out of that. They have come on board too late. There is no more slice for them. So they're not going to go much. They'll sell they are giving a few of the properties to Chinese and whatever, but that's not going to do much. Dominica, we know Dominica have always been there. Theirs have been small. There's a different product, and I think they have sustained it well, but of course Dominica was demolished. So in my analysis, I'm not even considering Dominica, Anguilla, and Montserrat, because they are peculiar cases. Antigua, of course, it's new on the block. It has a higher, it had a lower tariff and whatever. It has lost it. So the adjustment is going to take a little longer. I think the greatest impact would be on St. Kitts. How does St. Kitts bounce back on that? In fact, I think it's a beautiful opportunity it presents St. Kitts. Diversify the economy. Diversify the economy. In fact, this is what I put forward, because IMF said that the growth in many of these countries will still continue to be spurred by tourism and tourism associates. And I have always done that. I have written about that. I have published about that. I think in the context of St. Kitts, here's a beautiful opportunity.
To diversify.
To diversify further. Diversify further. Do the thinking. Diversify further. But if if you continue to inject a lot of capital, needed capital, into a sector that is apparently virtually declining, that's not good business. And not only that, because citizenship by investment is a high-end sector, it means in capital adjustment, capital injection to rebrand is very expensive. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
I mean, it's very expensive. It's not like rebranding a little corner shop. So one has to take a strategic decision. Look, where do we go with this? Does it have the potential for us to put that into it? In other words, you have to be strategic here now. The same thing I think you have to do with tourism. You have to decide, look, what is it that you want to do with tourism? If we want, you can speak about tourism if you want.
All right, it's just about 2:23. I think what we'll do, Peter, it's obvious that there's so much on the plate.
But I have
today.
a lot of
I know.
I have a lot of economic indicators we can look at.
Right.
We can look at employment, we can look at investment.
I want to open the lines. And have you come back for a part 2, because this can't just be done today.
I agree.
It can't be just, there's so much you have on the plate to offer.
I'm at your service, my lord.
Right, so I'm going to open the lines at this juncture and allow people to call in with their question, because I'm sure people out there listening have questions, have concerns, and which they'd like to raise with you. So we're going to open the lines, 465-6474. 465-0546, 662-1065. And if you're overseas, you can also call us, because the overseas line is open as well, 305-515-3099. My guest, Mr. Peter Adrian. Peter, it was interesting that you're here today doing this analysis. Today, the top regional story, and it's just 44-second clip, which I want to share with you now. Listen, and then we'll go straight to the telephone lines. The lines are ringing as we speak. But listen to this clip, which was put out by the ECCB and was heard on the Caribbean News at 12:30 right here on Freedom FM. Listen.
Okay, Head of the Caribbean Development Bank, Warren Smith, says the regional economy will perform better this year than it did in 2017. He was speaking at the end of the annual Board of Governors meeting in St. George's Thursday.
Generally, we make prognoses about what is going to happen in this region. And I think earlier this year we had a press conference in which we pretty much concluded that we expected that 2018 was going to be a better year for the Caribbean region than 2017. I think to some extent that is probably still holding, but the jury is still out. You never know what can transpire.
President of the Caribbean Development Bank, Dr. Warren Smith.
Okay, so economic growth in the Caribbean is expected to increase in 2018, right? He
didn't say anything, Juni.
He didn't say much, but that is all.
He didn't say anything.
That is what they had on.
But I mean,
he didn't say anything new.
Maybe the person who put up the clip, the clip together, did him an injustice. Because I know the CDB.
There's nothing there.
There's nothing there. The CDB, I know CDB is more powerful than that. Because look at, I just read IMF. IMF actually gave you the basis for their projection.
Right.
But you cannot quote the CDB president and make it sound as if he doesn't know what he's doing. I know those guys are good. They must have used figures. I want the figures to see if it corroborates with the IMF.
All right. Let's go to the telephone lines and see what our listeners are saying and thinking. Let's take this call. Caller, good afternoon. You're with us. Go ahead, please, caller.
Good afternoon, Junie.
Good afternoon. Go right ahead, please, with your question for Peter Adrian.
Very interesting program.
Thank you.
What I find interesting, though, I see him name out a couple of Caribbean countries to do with Canada. And I find it like a little bit offense when I hear us trying to say that Canada take the visa. Yes, but we know the reason why, Junie. The same thing when you're talking about the past, wasn't it? We see how it was bantered by the present government. It was pressured by the Canadian government, by our own people. It was jealousy, Juni. He said something that was very interesting to me too. When you drive around, a lot of projects stop. So, that's telling you something, Juni. Something about our people in St. Kitts and the Caribbean. It just, Juni, it baffled me. I mean, I was just used to listen back then, how we had the idea for this, it was that, it was a slush fund. Man, you could have named it, Junie. Now today, we ain't getting no data, nothing. All of a sudden, they're still trying to convince you that Canada just take with the visiting. We're not taking the blame fully by this government presently today, Junie. And that is one of the biggest problems. We kill our own self. We are jealous of our own self. Now the guy is saying things is trending down. We blame Douglas for everything. But he also not just for talking about St. Kitts. He talk about almost all the Caribbean countries. So is Douglas responsible for all the Caribbean countries, Junie? I mean, we need to be honest, clean, and come to our people with more sensible stuff than the foolishness some of these politicians will be trying to tell people who understand basic common sense. Big man, like, you just explain everything to us,
All right.
Them kind of people, Tony, who are going to be down to earth and let a small man could understand. When Timothy them talking about the big word and our kind of foolishness, we need the small man to understand exactly where we're going and what is the situation.
Thank you
our
very
kids'
much.
future is in jeopardy based on what partner is saying here today.
All right.
You have a good day.
All right. Numbers to call 465-0546-662-1065. Let's take another call. Caller, you're with us. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Junie.
Good afternoon, Sylvine.
Good afternoon, Adrian.
How are you?
Man, you bless me, you bless me, you bless me.
Thank you.
You know, I want to thank you for the analysis you did because, as I said, even this man, another show, many times our people, we are so misled by people who should know better. And I'm glad you gave the definition. And it is the GDP is all the final goods, the value of all the final goods and services.
Yes.
Yeah, all final. You have the word final.
Yes, final, yes.
Final. Now, I am also glad you gave the analysis in terms of the real estate.
Yes.
You know, and I don't know, were you watching Carib Scope, I think his name, on Sunday night, Jerry George? Did you get a chance to watch it?
No, not this last program.
Oh, on Sunday night, Jerry George was dealing with the topic, citizenship by investment in the OECS, basically.
Yes.
He did quite a good analysis. And it should be on his Facebook, Time to Face the Facts. So I want Junior and other people to take a look at it. Because what he was saying, that a lot of the money is siphoned off and sent to Singapore. You know, because he was saying, well, where's the money? You know, so much comes in, but a lot does not reach. And I hope people understand. Junior was asking a question, I don't think you answered him. He was asking you to account for the massive growth, he said, in, I think it's 14, of 6.9 and 7%. Yes. Coming out of a depression or recession, 4 straight years of negative growth. So maybe you could explain that to him. And I hope to listen, because the truth is, you hear people walking around and talking all sorts of things that they don't understand. They don't understand, but you know, politicians, and they have politicians give the idea that, put me back in tomorrow, and I will bring back the program. And for the last caller, the opposition had nothing to do with Canada removing the visa free.
All right.
All right then.
All right, thank you so much. Go ahead, Peter.
Let me say something. Let me say something about let me just be careful, but let me just say what I know. I can only say what I know. An economist deals with empirical data, that is data that can be measured and data that can be replicated. Those that he don't know, he say he doesn't know. And if he's humble, he say he doesn't know. Let me just speak on what I know. I do not know that in the Citizens by Investment program that it is a conduit to siphon money. And how I do not know that, I will just say how I know how it works. It is like you are selling a product. The product that you are selling is called citizenship. Canada, America, Australia, a number of them, they sell residencies. You can go and buy residence. And Malta sells citizenship. Now, St. Kitts, Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, St. Lucia, Grenada, they sell citizenship. Now, the citizenship that you get empowers you to apply for, as a citizen, a passport. When you get that passport, you have the same privilege as anyone who was born in the territory. And I mean every privilege and all privilege. Now, to talk about the siphon now. In the one that I know, the model that I know well is St. Kitts. The St. Kitts model sells 2 products. It says if you want to come and apply for citizenship, you either apply to be the owner of a real estate, whether it is a part of an apartment or villa or an entire building or a part of a condo, whatever it is. But the minimum value at that time was $400,000 US. Are you getting me, Juni?
I'm getting you, but
no, hold on. So,
yeah.
but I want to deal with what she said about the siphon. I'm saying that what I know.
That's what I wanted to find out myself.
I'm coming into that. What I know.
What money is siphoned off to Singapore?
I don't know, but that's what I'm trying to show you. Yes. So that, let us say that Juni is the real estate product was sold and managed by private persons, not government. It may be Juni, Harry, or Joseph. They are authorized developers. These people would sell whatever they sell, then that money is their money. They deal with that. The monies that came to government come in the form of contribution from the applicant who say, I don't want a building, I don't want a shell, I only want a citizenship certificate that will give me a passport. So in that case, I am only making a contribution of 250,000 US to the foundation. Are you with me?
Yes.
So if the people who make contribution into the foundation, that money can be siphoned nowhere to Singapore. No, I want to make you understand that. So I know what I know. As to what the private people do with their money, Peter don't know about that. So, but one thing that I know for sure, that the money that comes into the SIDF, the foundation, it can go to Vanuatu, it can go to Australia. It did not go to Singapore. It did not go to Kuala Lumpur. I just say that to demystify that.
Yes, and I'm glad you did that. Shed some light on that,
Yes.
Yes. All right, it's 2:36. The lines are open. We're getting some more calls. And I remind our overseas listeners that the overseas line is intact. It's up and running, 305-515-3099. Let's go back and take some more calls for Peter. Good afternoon, caller.
Judy.
Yes, good afternoon.
And that is only, that call you had from before was simply a diversion. The analysis that the brothers made has to do with the IMF report. And that is a significant report. Those other things basically are sideshows. He's correct. Do not go there. That is only a diversion. Somebody came to move their topic from the essence of what it is. At one particular time, it was X amount, we say 30% of GDP. Now it's going to go down in 2019 to 1% of GDP. That is significant. Don't get into diversions. That is just a talk. Just that the brother did with what is in it. He's doing a very good job in terms of letting people know what is happening in terms of the economy of the country and how economies are looked at by economists. And that's an excellent presentation.
Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that. Yes.
Juni, let me just, the previous caller also spoke about the high GDP growth in 2013, 14 and 15.
Right.
Yes. Those were exceptional growth performances. In 2014, the St. Kitts and Nevis registered 6.6% GDP growth. Yeah. That is exceptional, because let me tell you something. In economics, 4% growth is considered very good. 4% growth. And in 2014, the country registered 5.1% growth. In 2015, 5.0%. This is, in other words, even in some quarters, like in the United States, when you register 3% growth, even that is regarded
impressive.
Very good.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So we know very well, except for the case of China. You go back and look at China. It is very difficult for a small open economy like St. Kitts, like St. Lucia, like Grenada, like Antigua, like Barbados to ever sustain such high growth rate. So in a sense, in an economic sense, it was not expected that those high growth rate would have been sustained. In fact, what you see there, what I can see with my figures there, my figures show that in from 6.6% growth in 2014, you had a 1.5 percentage. Now, I did say percent.
Mm-hmm.
The percentage growth is the difference between the 2%.
Mm-hmm.
When there's a difference in the 2 percentage, we say percentage. So there were a difference of 1.5 percentage points. Now, that is in 2014. Now, if you look at 2014 to 2015, there were a difference of 0.1 percentage points. So, in a sense, even when the economy was in its height,
yes,
it was already showing
decline.
Decline.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, not decline. We don't use decline. We don't use decline in that sense. In other words, it's performing at a lesser growth rate. A lower rate.
All right.
Because whenever you say decline,
yes,
what first comes to the mind is that it is below the line.
Right.
It's negative.
Right.
So it never registered negative. Because up to now, St. Kitts is not registered negative. Because the 3.5 growth right now is excellent.
Okay.
It's excellent because it's near 4%.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. We're getting some more calls, so we're going to go back and take some more calls here. Okay. We missed that one. Let's try this one. Good afternoon, caller. All right, you can call us back. I see we missed those calls. Those of you that were calling while Peter was explaining, you can call back now. The lines are open and free again. Let's take this one that's coming in. Good afternoon, caller.
Yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
To you and your guest. Mr. Liber, I must commend you.
Thank you.
On Thursday night, I listened to a radio show. And actually, I was almost in, I don't know what word to use, but the content of the show, I was embarrassed to be a Kittitian.
Thank you.
I felt disgraced listening to the show. I thought then that the most professional, intelligent program, talk show on radio, on any radio in St. Kitts is yours. The way you yourself,
thank you, bro.
EK, and
Jamie.
And Jamie, the way you conduct the programs, I mean, you don't allow for this hatred, calling, and all this kind of thing.
None of that. None of that here. All sides contend.
All sides. And this program that you have now actually qualified everything that was going to my thoughts. The quality of your program is very high. You're doing very, very good. We need maybe one or two more like you. The competition wars. You're blessed, my brother.
Thank you so much. All right, thank you so much. Yeah. All right. Thank you for that commendation. We try our best here. We try to keep it real. Let's go back and take some more calls. Let's go to the overseas line, Peter. I see overseas callers trying to get in. Let's try this one. Caller, good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon.
Yes. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I just like to remind Mrs. Henry that in 1983 we had negative growth, negative 2.0 growth, and in 1984 we had 9.65 positive. So there's a precedent for this high growth after recession. Okay, and with regards Canada's visa waiver. Yeah. She has to remember, right, that this present government cleaned up the system, according to them, and we still don't have visa free access to Canada. So it couldn't just be about what happened beforehand. Okay, if it's cleaned up now, we should have gotten it back. Okay, and the last thing to your guest, you mentioned that we should be doing our utmost to try and diversify. What options do you think we have? Right, because that is the big question. We know in the past we've gone through different phases from agriculture to light industries,
to tourism,
to services, to tourism. What next? You know, and really and truly, the bottom line is there should be a reference point if we're going to accept the figures of reputable organizations like the World Bank and IMF and the Central Bank. We should do so without question. Don't take them one time when it's convenient and discard them when it's not. We have to have some kind of standard.
All right.
Okay then.
All right, thank you so much. Peter?
I think that's a very good question. Thank you very much, caller. Very, very, I like that because I wanted to say something on the whole issue of diversification. But let me just talk about a little on what he said about the negative growth rate. The figures, those coming from the recession in 2008, 2009, the whole region, the world, recorded negative growth.
Right.
But one thing that is very clear from my research, when economies are coming out of negative growth, therefore, you can't get high growth in a period. But one thing that is very clear, that if you look at St. Kitts, there were deliberate policies, whether it is infrastructural development, but I think a lot of that was the acceleration and the impact of the inflow of new monies that were associated with Citizenship by Investment program, and of course how it impacted on both the real estate and the housescape, So in a sense, these things did not happen by chance. In other words, because while we saw St. Kitts was recording high growth rate and were doing things, we look at the rest of the region. And if you want, next time I can bring figures for that same period.
Sure.
They were not doing well. Why? Because a number of them were relaxing on getting transfers and subsidies from the rest of the world. But very few of them, like in the case of St. Kitts, actually did something different. You might have your own view on the product, but they actually came out with an alternative or a response. That's the critical thing. When you diversify, you have to come with a deliberate policy intervention.
So how would this take place in terms of diversification? Because he said we'd been down the service industry, tourism, agriculture, etc. How do you see this diversification shaping up to better the lives of the citizens of the Federation and the Caribbean?
Well, you have to be careful when you say better the life, and because
that's what it's designed to do.
I know. And I'm going to answer the question because I have some issues on some suggestions on diversification.
Right.
But when you say better the life, at this point, according to the indicators, whether it's employment, whether it is annual wage indicator, whether it is per capita GDP, whether it is debt overhang, St. Kitts and Nevis has no comparison in the Caribbean. St. Kitts and Nevis beats.
Well, the PM say we have the platinum standard, you know.
Well, I'm not even talking, I'm not going by that. I'm saying that the data is showing that St. Kitts, having been taken by the previous administration into a first world economy,
right,
it has remained there.
Okay.
And it is performing very well. Standards way in the area of wages, tax to GDP, in the area of per capita income, although that does not show distribution, in the area of employment, St. Kitts is unparalleled by any of the countries in the Caribbean. So in a sense, what we're talking about is how they can make living standard better.
ICT?
Because they're already good.
Right.
Now, one of the suggestions that I have is St. Kitts have deliberately opted for the service economy. It did that when it closed the sugar industry. Don't forget that.
Right.
Antigua had done that long before. It did that. So in other words, if you look at the way that St. Kitts has inserted itself in the global economy, it has inserted itself in a very, if you want, a very dynamic way in the global service industry. If you look at the varying areas, whether it is banking, finance, whether it is travel, industry, transport, communication, as the GDP is showing here, whether it is real estate, that is travel and hospitality, it would be difficult for you to attempt to remove us from the service industry. You don't attempt to do that. What you need to do, therefore, is to, how do you make that service industry increase value added, local value added? And one of the suggestions I have is for the tourism industry. The tourism industry is going to be with you, whether you like it or not. How do you make it increase its value added? So we have lamented that the value added is very low. We continue to say it. If for the Caribbean also, when you compare it with Latin America, I am suggesting that we need to strengthen the sectoral linkage. We have been saying it over and over, between agriculture on one front, on the forward, and between culture on the backward linkage.
What about ICT?
But ICT, well, you don't even have to link up with ICT, because ICT right now, in the information age that we are in, ICT is what drives all processes.
Okay.
ICT is not simply a sector anymore. ICT is the lifeblood of any economy.
Right.
That's what drives.
Okay.
In fact, that is why, as we speak in here, people are following us overseas.
Correct. I have an overseas caller here on the line. Caller, you there?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead, please.
To the caller, Peter. To the host, the guest there. Peter.
Thank you. Yeah, he's listening.
Yes, we think it's Nevis is in a grand position in terms of its economy right now and the growth, meaning as it relates to global growth rates, 3%, which is excellent, 3.5% thereabout. Now, in terms of its sustainability in the out years to come,
Yeah, he's listening.
there are a number of projects in St. Kitts, like the Sixth Sense, the Hyatt, of course, and the other one there, I think it's the Ramada, or whatever it is. And those are good indicators as to where we're going, as to going forward, as to the economy continue to churn out good numbers in terms of GDP. Meaning that the collectibles of taxes and the likes would be up because, of course, government concerned to its workers, etc., and that new money will be recycled through the economy. So in the out years, for the next couple of years, it looks good for St. Kitts. But there's a little drag on the economy because there's no expansion in Nevis in terms of new ventures or new monies. So Nevis become more of a dependency, of course. And if that persists and that continues, it would have a drag on the economy, the overall economy in St. Kitts Nevis. What say you as it relates to that in terms of having, creating some sort of avenues to buttress the economy as we move forward overall, from a federation scope as opposed to just a St. Kitts scope? I need you to speak towards that, speak towards how that can be somehow at least affected in a positive way. What's your view on that?
All right. All right. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Stick up in. I want to take this local call. That's an overseas call. Let's take these two local calls that have been ringing for a while. Good afternoon, caller.
Yes, good afternoon, Juni.
Okay.
It is the due diligence, right? And I want you seriously and Peter Adrian to take a look at the Time to Face the Facts. He has a Facebook page, Take a look at it and see what you see. Now, Adrian, how do you equate, is there any correlation between economic growth and employment? Because I, for one, contended that when they had this high rate, it was impossible. In fact, the ECCB had projected a 3.8% rate of growth. I saw the raw data, which showed a decrease of 30% in construction, yet the IMF estimated a 6 point something. I said it couldn't happen. I mean, just being around. And another thing, how can we resurrect, is it possible to resurrect all of these dormant shells, as you call them? Is there any hope for them?
All right. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Sylvine. We'll get Peter to respond right after this call. Good afternoon, caller. You're on the air.
Good afternoon,
Good afternoon.
And good afternoon, June.
Good afternoon.
Peter, what part would cooperatives play in the resurgence of our economy?
All right. Cooperatives. Okay. All right. Thank you so much for that.
What would it play
in the resurgence? Okay. Peter, we have the overseas caller who asks some very important questions.
Nevis,
yes.
The Nevis, yes.
Right. And then you had Sylvine and the gentleman sounding like Earl Clark. Go ahead.
I have that.
Okay. Respond.
Let me just speak to the diversification in the context of the entire country.
Mm-hmm. In the resurgence. Okay. Peter.
What we're really talking about here is a policy issue. And that is why when I set up the methodology, we spoke about methodology and policy. And we talk about the fiscal economy. And the policy of the fiscal economy can actually, we said, stimulate or dampen. Now, I mean, what he's really asking me here is what we call Keynesian economics. Keynesian economics says that neoclassical economics says, don't touch, go in the market and don't touch it. Leave it alone. That's what Republicans teach. Keynesian economics says, the state or the government must have a role in the market. In other words, creating how they want development to take place, what are the preferences or the sectors that will drive. But I would think St. Kitts is in a very unique situation to address the issue that the caller speaks about. Because what you have is a government of unity. In other words, what you have, I have been here from 1991. From my understanding and my research, I have never seen a better opportunity as it is now to get a holistic development strategy, a holistic development approach between St. Kitts and Nevis. Right. So the question is asking, in other words, it seems to me, because I followed the program, I followed the manifesto, I followed everything, it seems to me that was one of the issues on which the current administration was established. I just want to leave it there on Nevis.
All right.
Now, with respect to Sylvine and unemployment, in economics, Sylvine knows that, we say there is full employment in any country if the unemployment rate is 4% or less. I have been here since 1991, Juni, and all my analysis, all the figures that I have seen, St. Kitts have never had an unemployment problem, and currently does not have. Unemployment in St. Kitts is 3.9%. So St. Kitts have always had a full employment issue because, according to the benchmark, the number of people who are willing and able and are actively looking for work is always below 4%. And right now it is 3.9%. What you have in the other areas, in the other countries, you have very high unemployment rate. For example, look at in Grenada, I see in 2014 42.5%. When I look at St. Lucia, if you look at the 15 to the 45 age group, unemployment is as high as 40%. In some other countries like Barbados, it's as high as 35%. So there is something about St. Kitts also that makes that's unique about it. One, the population is a migratory population. At any time, there are people always moving out of St. Lucia because St. Kitts is so inserted into the economies on both sides of the Atlantic. You walk on the road, a man, either he's Canadian, either he's American, or he has a British passport, or he has a green card or something. You are walking down the road, you see a man, and he's eating from the garbage bin. You say, man, what stupidness you doing there? If you check him and you do your research on him, he's a green card holder. He's a green card holder. So in a sense, St. Kitts is so mobile, and because of the smallness of the population and because of the activities, that is the activities that are taking place, it has never had. And I think it will be very difficult to get the social issues that are related to unemployment as we see in the other CARICOM countries, or as we see in the other islands, particularly the islands that are more agrarian down south. This is not likely to be seen in St. Kitts.
All right, it's 3 o'clock. Our time is just about up, but I'll tell you what, we'll go for an extra 10 minutes and take this call. Caller, good afternoon, you're on the air.
Yes, Mr. Adrian asked about what is unique about St. Kitts. I think it's because of our size. Actually, usually size is a bad factor in economics because of economies of scale, but in our case, I think it makes us easier to manage. Okay, and that's a plus. All right, and in terms of the employment that you mentioned, I think we perhaps underestimate the STEP or PEP, whichever, right? In terms of one, its contribution to the economy, because in a way it's a way of redistributing income, and I think it also, although it's not permanent employment or supposedly not permanent employment, it has been around for a long time. So it's a good safety net, and it puts money directly into the hands of people who will spend it, okay, and so stimulate the economy. All right, and the other thing that we did right, and actually Germany and United States did the same thing, and it's no accident that they emerged better out of the 2009 recession, just like we did. Okay, they also basically they paid industry to keep on workers. We did that at the Marriott. They did that in Germany. Paid the industry to retain and train their workers. Okay, and so there were similarities in approaches to how we looked at the economic downturn, why we emerged out of it better than most. Okay?
All right.
Let me say something on Julie.
Yeah.
I'm coming from St. Lucia. I'm from St. Lucia, and I'm just coming from St. Lucia. St. Lucia has STEP. They call them different names. Nice, different acronyms that they call them. Mm-hmm. Unemployment is still double digits. Unemployment is still 45% among 15 to 45-year-old. The uniqueness about St. Kitts is that it's not so much the size. St. Kitts is so well inserted into the global economy. You get inserted into the global economy, particularly with the development of your transport, your communication, etc. And citizenship by investment further inserted St. Kitts into the global economy. So that in economics, when we speak about diseconomies of scale, we say you're small and therefore you benefit from diseconomies of scale, meaning that your cost of doing things is very high. In the case of St. Kitts, it's not so. Because of its spread tentacles, of its insertion, in a sense, it is like a small firm that is connected to a number of firms all over the place. Diseconomies of scale is no longer an issue. Right now, it has become economies of scale because it takes advantage. St. Kitts made two good movements. It inserted itself And do you know what? Services are high price. It moved into a service economy. Let me just show you practically. The man who takes all the problem to grow the dashing, or let us take mangoes. He grow the mangoes. He doesn't make much. But the fella who takes the mango and turn it, manufacture it into mango juice, he makes 7 times more than him. And the fella who takes the mango juice and distributes it, he makes more than him. That is why somebody who is in services is more highly paid than somebody who's in primary. So you look at the Windward Islands, they are locked in primary production, into agriculture. There is a rigidity. There is an ossification that keeps them there.
Right.
St. Kitts have taken off.
I got you. All right, look, it's just about 5 minutes after 3. Peter, we're going to wrap up. The phones are ringing.
We did not even discuss half of what we have there.
I know. That is why we're going to have a follow-up. And with your permission, I'm going to set a date with you off air when you can come back and continue this very important discussion.
I would be happy, Juni, if you could bring somebody else.
Yes.
Like
So somebody who could
somebody
who is
so we can have
opposed.
it like a panel.
A panel, okay.
So that don't believe
I'll
that
do that. I have that person already in mind.
Have all that answers. I
I
don't
have a person in mind who is also an economist. So I think you all could trash it out.
Nice. So next time it would be nice for a discussion.
Yes.
Or let us disagree.
All right. It's just about 5 minutes after 3 o'clock. Thank you for calling. Those of you on the Freedom Wall, there's a very proactive commentary going on the Freedom Wall. And I want to thank the people who called in from overseas and those who called in locally as well. Peter, I'm going to give you 2 minutes, 3 minutes to wrap up your presentation today. But in your presentation, I want you to emphasize the importance of following an economic trail that would lead to sustainability here in St. Kitts and Nevis, where the economy would continue to grow. As you say, it has taken off. It is doing all kinds of good things in terms of the global economy. So we want to continue that. But we also want our young people to find meaningful employment, and we want to see the economic diversification of which you speak take place in the not-too-distant future. Because, as you say, the CBI program is facing collapse, and so we have to find other means and measures in which the economy can grow. Peter, Adrian.
Yes. I want to end by first taking a quote from an economist that I have tremendous respect for, Lennox J. Andrew from Grenada. And I'm just going to read a sentence or two from his publication. It is called The Role of Government in the Economy. It says macroeconomic management involves monitoring the behavior of 4 major macroeconomic variables and taking corrective actions on time to ensure that there are desired outcome. These macroeconomic variables are the gross domestic product or GDP, the balance of payment, the fiscal balance, and the money supply. The money supply, while government have a role in that, central bank is handling that. In other words, policy is very critical. Policy at this stage, the policy of the government will determine at what rate the economy is going to be spurred, stimulated. The development of a development strategy. In other words, why are we in that particular sector? Does that sector have the capacity to take us where we want? Developing a vision, a development vision. Where is St. Kitts going to be in 10, 20 years' time? How does the program that we do now get us for that? What kind of population are we going to have? We are moving into the information age. What kind of products we want to sell out there? what kind of situation we want to have in society. How do we want the wealth of this country to be distributed?
Yes.
What is happening in St. Kitts, we have to be very careful. There's a lot of money in circulation, but it is getting very highly skewed. So we have to open our eyes on that.
When you say it's getting highly skewed,
in other words, it's not properly distributed. So you have a few people with a lot of money. Now the bottom is beginning to get large, and we begin to see that we have to open our eyes on the issue of the capacity of the economy to absorb. And what do I mean? To create employment, because we get indicators. We can get indicators when we are not doing well. We see more people on the street selling and trying to survive and trying to make a living. It means that the economy is not absorbing. So notwithstanding the 4% I spoke about, and I said there is full employment, but you have a lot of pockets of discontent and a lot of pockets of people.
Especially among our young people.
Exactly. But the thing is, the good thing in St. Kitts is because the people are very migrant, they are very mobile. Because I used to go to all the Form 4 and Form 5s in the different schools and speak with them. You will be standing before a class of 20 or 40 people. About 3/4 of them are Americans. So in a sense, if it was like in the case of St. Lucia, where all of them was going to stay in St. Lucia, you would have had a problem here for a long time. But because of the insertedness of that country, of St. Kitts, it in a sense can cover up St. Kitts and Nevis, can cover up poor policy, but it will not always cover the poor policy. What we need now is a direct interventionist approach by the administration, so that the good things that we have built, we can continue to build on that.
Excellent. Peter, I am profoundly grateful for the time you've spent with us. You've given us of your expertise, of your knowledge, and you've put it in such a way that everybody can understand. And you didn't come here to preach any partisan politics or anything like that. You came with a mandate to tell us about how we can sustain economic growth, what we can do as a country to move the product forward. And you've done that very well. And I know there's a lot more that we haven't touched. And that is why I'm going to invite you to come back for part 2 of this program.
I would be happy to come.
Thank you again, Peter Adrian, for the time you've spent with us. And God bless you as you move forward.
Thanks.
Have a great day. All right, so that's Peter Adrian, my guest here today on Issues, and that's how we wrap it up for today and this week. EK will be back on Monday, but do look forward to seeing Peter in another 2 weeks or so. In another 2 weeks or so, he'll be back, guaranteed. And we'll get another person to come in so that we can have some back and forth, some face-offs on the issues. I think Peter likes that, and I know the listeners out there would also like that. And we'll have more intervention from you as well via the telephone calls. Thank you, and God bless you, and may God continue to bless this Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. I'm Junie Librad. Good afternoon.
It's all about Orlando Television. Freedom 106.5, the maddest thing in the drive. Lord, what we say? Plenty gal man, and is Freedom 106.5, them listening. Mad up.